Marty Klein. I'm going to make a few brief remarks this morning. Marty then will make his own remarks, and then afterwards we'll take questions. If you have any questions, there's two ways you can get questions to us this morning. One is just use the chat in Zoom, and the other will be if you can text the number on the media advisory. Both of those will flow through Suzanne Gage. Ms. Gage will tell me those questions, and then I'll repeat them for everyone, and then we can go from there. So thanks everyone for joining us this morning. This morning, we are jointly announcing that criminal charges have been filed relating to signature fraud as part of the petition process for both of the marijuana ballot initiatives that were submitted to the Secretary of State. Mr. Klein, in a minute, will go through some of the details regarding that particular fraud and what was uncovered. But at a very high level, I can tell you that the fraud that we have uncovered so far has implicated dozens of signature pages, petition forms, and included things like names of deceased individuals, misspelled names, incorrect birth dates, and clearly fabricated signatures and names on these particular forms. Part of the reason we're doing the press conference today is because election season we are underway in election season. The election is around the corner, and the integrity of our elections is of critical importance, a statewide importance to Nebraskans all around the state. And so I want to emphasize a couple of things. The first thing is that these criminal charges are the result of a very collaborative, tightly coordinated work between a number of different agencies. On the one hand, election officials, including especially, I should say, the Hall County election officials who did outstanding work, the Hall County attorney, of course, Marty Klein, as well as our office. And I think Nebraskans should feel confident that we are on the lookout for voter fraud or anyone who might interfere with our elections, and that we will investigate those actions, we'll do it promptly, and that we will take action. The second thing that I would like to say is that for those who might be considering interfering in Nebraska's elections through fraudulent means like this or otherwise, they should know that election officials and law enforcement agencies are on the lookout, and that if we identify, we will be looking for those actions, and we will prosecute. We will prosecute appropriate actions. And I think our actions today help reflect that. The last thing I do want to say is, because I'm sure that we will get questions on this, is what does this mean for the particular petitions? On the one hand, as you are aware, today is the certification deadline for the Secretary of State. He has to do his own analysis and conduct his own investigation, not his own investigation. He has to do his own analysis and determination under the law as to certification. What I can tell people is that these are criminal charges. However, as part of our overall investigation, working with the Hall County attorney, we have identified a number of other irregularities as part of this process. The Secretary of State and the election, or the counties around the state, have done really yeoman's work under very difficult circumstances, reviewing signatures for these petitions, as well as many other petitions. And part of the consequence of having so many petitions this year is that it's taken some time to get all these signatures and all the information in. And so our work is still ongoing. It will go past today, I can tell you that. But I can also say that what we have identified in terms of irregularities, beyond just the forgery of the signatures, is that, or the fraudulent signatures, is that there are at least several thousand signatures that are implicated. I don't have more to say in depth about that today, but we will in the coming days as our work continues. With that, I will turn over the mic to Mr. Klein. Marty?
Thank you, Attorney General Hilgers. I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. I wanted to make sure that folks know across the state that the elections and the voting process is a really sound process. In particular, my election commissioner here in Hall County, Tracy Overstreet, and her people in the election commission office did an amazing job here. When those ballots, the ballot initiatives come into the Secretary of State's office, those aren't verified by the Secretary of State. They're verified at the local election commission office. And that's where Tracy Overstreet and her election commission workers did an amazing job. They were diligent, meticulous, thorough. They go through those election petitions, the petitions line by line, to verify that the voters that have signed those petitions are in fact registered voters in the state of Nebraska and have authority to sign those petitions. It was during that process that Ms. Overstreet found a number of irregularities that really gave her concern, and that's when she engaged the Hall County Sheriff's Office. Investigator Donovan Fowler and Sergeant Josh Moline got involved with that case. They reviewed the the forms of the petitions that had the irregularities with them, with Tracy and her people, and found a number of very concerning irregularities, including at the time that we filed the case, they were on the legalization petitions that were circulated by an individual from February 18th to June 30th of 2024. There were 104 signatures found on these petitions, of 21 petitions that were turned in that had irregularities. 68 of those petitions had wrong dates of birth. 8 were signed by individuals who could not have signed them because they were deceased, and 6 of the names were misspelled. On the regulation petitions, those were distributed by this individual from February 9th to June 26, 2024. There were 17 petitions that found irregularities. Of those petitions also, there were 98 signatures that were on those 17 petitions with irregularities. Of those 98 signatures, 68 had wrong dates of birth, 8 were signed by individuals who were deceased, and 6 had misspellings on them. This led to an interview of an individual by the name of Michael Egbert. A couple of interviews, and during those interviews, Mr. Egbert did acknowledge that he had at times left those signature pages alone as he had gone to the restroom or gone to break. He had in fact written names down, gone out into a phone book and got names of individuals with addresses here in the Grand Island, Hall County area. And then he did on occasion sign those names himself. The voter didn't sign them. And as a result of those admissions and the investigation that was done in this case, we have filed a charge in the Hall County Court of 1 count of petition fraud, in essence. That count covers all of the petition fraud signatures that were collected from that February 9th through the June 30th, 2024. That count is a class 4 felony, and he will be arraigned in the near future. I will turn it back over to the Attorney General.
Thank you. Thank you, Marty. Before we take questions, let me just say, this is such a great reflection of the relationships that have been built over time over the law enforcement community, as well as the amazing public servants in Hall County in particular. I think, Marty, I'm very happy that Marty identified the good people who helped work on this particular investigation. I would want to recognize my criminal bureau chief, Mike Guinan. It's because of really years of relationship building and layers of trust between our offices, as well as the great work and the great public servants who work in the election commissioner's office. That's how this investigation was able to be successful, and that's why we are where we are today, because of all the great teamwork. So I think Nebraskans should be proud of the cooperation amongst agencies, as well as the great public servants who work in the election commissioner's office. With that, we will take questions. As a reminder, for those of you who may have joined a little after we started, if you have questions, please use the Zoom chat or text the number on the media advisory. All of those questions, I don't have a Zoom chat in front of me, so I'm not seeing those. They will all come through Suzanne Gage. And with that, I will ask Suzanne for the first question.
10/11 news. How will today's findings impact the ballot certification? Are the amount of fraudulent signatures enough to prevent the medical marijuana petitions and certification? Why are you announcing this on the day ballots must be verified?
Okay, so a couple questions from 10/11. The first question is, how will this impact our work? Will impact certification today? And the other question, why are we announcing it today? I'll answer the second one first. We're announcing it today because this is when the investigation was complete. There's no, when we had the investigation complete and the charges were filed, we thought it was appropriate to let the public know that it's not timed relating today's certification deadline in any way. Regarding certification, that's a really good question for the Secretary of State. But I will say today is not the final end date one way or the other in terms of whether a particular petition has signatures for the ballot. The key question is, were the signatures submitted, that valid signatures under the law submitted within the deadline? And whether those signatures are part of a certified process today, or whether or not those signatures or otherwise invalid signatures are found to be invalid after today, that timing actually at the end of the day doesn't make a difference. And so I would say first that today is not the final day for signature verification. Secondly, our work is still ongoing, and we have reviewed a number of the counties, but not all of the counties. Data is still coming in just even through the latter half of this week. And as I mentioned before, there have been we've seen these irregularities implicate several thousand signatures. So our work's still ongoing. We will have more to say. Today is the deadline for the Secretary of State, but it is not our deadline in order to complete our work. Next question.
John Hannah from the AP, have you told the Secretary of State your finding in the charges? And if you have, did you make any assessment whether the potential number of potentially fraudulent signatures would be so large as to warrant not certifying the initiatives?
The questions were, have I made the Secretary of State aware of the charges? And the second question is, have I made him aware of the magnitude of the signatures that we have where we have found issues? The answer to both questions are yes. I have made the Secretary of State aware. He is aware of the investigation. He has been kept appropriately apprised of that particular process. And I've also kept him apprised of the work that we're doing. And as I mentioned, our work started fairly recently. We have 93 counties. We have tens of thousands of signatures to go through. There are a number of issues beyond just the forged signatures that have come to light because of this particular investigation. And so while I have kept the Secretary of State apprised of the work that we're doing, I also don't have a final number to give him. I don't have a final number to give you. And so until that work is complete, we won't be in a position to provide anyone with those particular numbers. However, the Secretary of State, like you do now, is aware that we think that there are several thousand, at a minimum, several thousand signatures that are implicated by the irregularities that we have found so far. Another question?
Martha Stoddard says, has this affected signatures in other counties?
Martha Stoddard from the World Herald has asked whether this has implicated signatures in other counties. To be very precise, Martha, the fraud issues largely localized. These fraudulent signatures largely localized to Hall County. Caveat: we're still working through everything. This particular circulator did have petitions in other counties, and so it is certainly possible that we will uncover additional fraudulent signatures in other counties. That's the first part on the criminal side. And in addition, our investigation is still ongoing and understanding all the players that might be involved. So that's point one. Point two is from the irregularities perspective. Absolutely, we've seen those in many of the counties. I can't precisely say because I haven't looked if it's all of them that we've reviewed so far, but it is certainly a significant number.
Brian Mastro from WW. This complaint seems like there are 200 questionable signatures. That would still mean the petition is still past the threshold by thousands and thousands. Can't two things be true? The AG can keep investigating and the Secretary of State can certify.
That's a great question, Brian. So Brian said, hey, I'm looking at this probable cause affidavit or the complaint. I'm seeing a couple hundred signatures implicated on the one hand, and on the other hand, there's several thousand, maybe above the threshold for each of these petitions. Can it be both true that our office can continue to investigate and the Secretary of State can certify today? So if the answer to that is yes, let me give you a bit of context. What we put forward today in the complaint and what we're talking about today is the criminal investigation. That number, by the way, the number that we have in there is not a static, firm number because our investigation is still ongoing. And so, as I mentioned in regard, I think, to Martha's question, there are other counties that we're looking at for the fraudulent signatures. So that number could grow. However, to your other point, which is, even if it doubles or triples from the fraudulent signature perspective, doesn't it mean that the Secretary of State can still certify? The answer is yes, the Secretary of State absolutely can certify today, given what we know today. However, that, as I mentioned before, that's not the final chapter in this particular process. If it becomes true that there are signatures that are invalid signatures or signatures collected contrary to law that are not valid, or on forms that are not valid, or in some of the many ways that signatures cannot be valid in this particular process, such that the valid signatures dip below that level, even if it doesn't happen by today, that would still, that under the law, that would still stop any particular petition from becoming law, even if it were to be successful. So to your question, Brian, yes, the Secretary of State will continue with his process to certify or not certify today. That's his process. We have our process. It absolutely will continue after today. And depending on the outcome of that process, there will be more to be said about the validity of the petitions. Another question?
Zach Wendling from Nebraska Examiner. Are all 6 petitions in circulation this election cycle being investigated or being given the same scrutiny? Are the allegedly fraudulent signatures in the count that the Secretary of State had announced August 30th?
So the first question from Zach is, are all the other signature petitions being given the same scrutiny? I'm going to answer that. And then, and the second question was, did the Secretary of State include the fraudulent signatures in his preliminary count from the other day? I'll answer that one first. I don't know the answer to that question, Zach. That's really a question for the Secretary of State. To the first question, I want Marty to weigh in as well, because he's very close to the Hall County. All petitions, in my view, in my experience working with great election officials across the state of Nebraska, receive the same scrutiny, no matter what they are. And if one petition, no matter what it is, has evidence that there is fraud, I would be very confident that election officials would bring that up to their local law enforcement authorities, and I have equal confidence that those law enforcement authorities would do the right thing. What I can say is that this just happens to be the one petition where this has been at least brought to our attention. And so, but all petitions in Nebraska, and that's what Nebraskans expect, that we treat all petitions, we have a process and it applies to everyone equally and fairly. Marty, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I'm going to speak locally here in Hall County. Our election commissioner, Tracy Overstreet, and her people are very diligent about what they do. And I believe that if she would have found any irregularities on any of the other petitions, she would have brought those forward too. So I do have a lot of confidence and faith in what the election commissioner here, Tracy Overstreet, and her people do. So yes, they're all treated the same and they're all scrutinized. And I think that's locally here in Hall County, I have confidence to that.
Thank you, Marty. You have another question?
Molly from World Hero. Is Edward the only person criminally charged in connection with this investigation?
So Molly from the World Herald asks, is this particular defendant the only person criminally charged in this particular investigation? The answer is, this is the only person who has been charged to date. All of our criminal investigation is not completed. It's not concluded. And so this is the only one as of today.
Chris Dunkert from the Lincoln Journal-Star. Has your office been notified or taken action to any other irregularities brought to your attention for other petitions circulated this cycle? Did you subject all petitions to the same level of scrutiny?
Chris Dunker asked, has my office been made aware of any other irregularities for other petitions? And did I subject this particular set of petitions to the same scrutiny we would subject to any other petition? The answer is, Chris, we are not aware of any other irregularities, at least been brought to our attention. We don't, it is not the case that our office in this context typically is a criminal investigatory agency. What has been brought to our attention with this petition, and as far as I'm aware, only this petition, is a criminal issue. As part of that investigation, it did uncover other irregularities that we are now looking into. But the answer to your question, Chris, is I'm not aware of no other irregularities that at least been brought to our office's attention. Certainly, that doesn't mean I've blessed the process of any of the other petitions, but that's what I'm aware of. And I can absolutely tell you definitively with 100% certainty, no matter what the petition was, if we had evidence of signature fraud, the same kind of evidence that we have in this case, absolutely wouldn't matter what the petition would be. We would absolutely provide the same set of scrutiny. The integrity of our elections transcends ideology, it transcends policy issues, it transcends party. This is about making sure that Nebraskans have confidence in our election system. And if we were made aware of other petitions with similar issues, you can bet your bottom dollar that we would have given it the same level of scrutiny. Any more questions?
Martha Stoddard, if the petitions are put on the ballot and passed, could your work lead to the measures being tossed out?
So Martha has asked whether if the petitions go on the ballot and they're certified to go on the ballot and they're passed, could our work lead to those initiatives not actually becoming law? I want to speak at a very high level, Martha, what we've seen in other cases in Nebraska's history. Certainly, if it's certified and there are ballots, this is an issue for the court. Then it's been on the ballot and there is voting that's going to be undertaken. It's really an issue for the courts. Courts are treated in a number of different ways. One way is they might order that the voting doesn't actually happen. If it should never have been on the ballot in the first place, they won't order it. They won't allow it on the ballot. I'm sorry, they won't count the votes. And in other ways, they might allow the counting of votes, but just say that it's not valid law. I don't want to speculate what's going to happen here, but certainly there is Nebraska's precedent on these types of issues, signature threshold issues, I should say, not fraudulent, not necessarily the exact fact pattern we have to hear today, but signature threshold issues that have come to a court's attention after the certification deadline. And that's two ways that the court has handled it in the past. And we have time for some more questions, but I want to make everyone aware that Mr. Klein has a hard deadline at 10 o'clock. And so I want to be respectful of his schedule. So
Tom Becker has two questions. How many signatures were negated? If found guilty, what is the penalty?
Marty, I'll let you handle. You want to handle the second? I'm sorry, I need to say the question. Tom Becca asked, how many signatures have been negated? And then the second question is what the penalty is if convicted on this particular charge. Tom, I'll answer the first question. I'll hand the second one off to Marty. First question is, I can only tell you that it's several thousand at this point because our work's still ongoing. We need to double and triple check the work that it would be, I think, inappropriate for me to tell you that it was, 3,412 if we haven't triple checked our work and it's really, 3,455. One. Secondly, we still have more counties coming in and we actually have other issues that we're looking into. So the best I could tell you, Tom, on that is several thousand. I can't say more definitively now, but I can tell you that when we reach those kinds of conclusions, we will produce that answer. So Marty, do you want to handle the second question in terms of the penalty on a class 4?
Sure. A class 4 felony, which is what this gentleman is charged with, has a possible penalty of a maximum of 2 years in prison with 12 months of post-release supervision or a $10,000 fine or both. There's no minimum sentence for this particular charge if he's convicted of the class 4 felony.
Okay. Thank you, Marty. Next question.
Steve White from NTV. Hall County has evidence in 2020 that fraudulent signatures were submitted on the voter ID petition. The reporter says they know because their signature was one of them. Is there any connection? And will you or have you filed charges on that?
So Steve White asked, he said that in 2020, there were fraudulent signatures submitted in Hall County in conjunction with the voter ID petition. And he knows that because apparently his name was one of the forged signatures, and whether or not that's something that we would bring charges on. Steve, I was not the Attorney General in 2020. And until you said that right now, I was unaware of those particular issues. And I'm not actually offhand aware of what the statute of limitations are for this particular type of crime. But I can tell you that if I was Attorney General in 2020 and I was made aware of that, we would have treated it exactly the same as we would have with these ballot petitions. We would have followed the same process, and had the evidence led to a criminal charge, we would have charged.
If I may weigh in on that, I am aware of the ballot or the petition irregularities in 2020. There has to be investigation that is done, and then it has to lead to an identifiable individual to prove that that individual in fact falsified signatures. So it was looked into. There just wasn't a case to be made at the time.
Thank you, Marty. Thank you, Steve, for the question.
10-11. Have any other election commissioners reached out to authorities about irregular signatures? You've mentioned that thousands of signatures could be invalid, but Klein only filed for a few hundred that were fraudulent. Beyond speculation, how can you substantiate that thousands could be fraudulent?
So the question is with two questions. One is, are there other, have we been made aware from other election commissioners regarding regarding fraudulent signatures? The answer to that question is I am not aware. That doesn't mean that someone hasn't identified something and maybe let their local county authorities know, but we're not aware in our office. The second question is how can I say, it's a great question actually, how can we say there are several thousand potential signatures got to be thrown out or invalid when only we're talking about maybe several hundred fraudulent signatures? Kind of goes back a little bit to an earlier question. Maybe I'll be a little bit more precise. So when I say there are other irregularities means including but not limited to fraudulent signatures. As those of you who have been involved in petition process before you would be aware that there are actually quite a few different ways, quite a few different legal requirements to ensure that a signature is a valid one. It might be, Marty Klein or Mike Hilgers signing the particular signature page, but it may not be valid. It may not be valid for a lot of different reasons. One reason might be that the form was never signed by the circulator. Another reason might be that the circulator didn't properly notarize the petition. There are other ways that have otherwise valid signature, authentic signature, non-fraudulent signature is not counted as part of this process. And so when I refer to other irregularities, I am in part referring in part to the extent of this particular fraud, yes. But what I am also pointing to is the broader issues that maybe don't implicate criminal activity in the same way, but absolutely under the law, invalidate signatures or signature forms. And so when I say thousands, I'm not saying we've identified thousands of fraudulent signatures. To the contrary, I would say that we haven't, at least not thousands, and at least not yet. What I am saying, though, is that the Nebraska petition process and the integrity of that process require certain legal requirements to be met. And we have identified with evidence that those, in some cases, that they have not been met. And that is why I say several thousand. It's a good question. Thank you for asking it.
Last question.
We maybe time for one more, only because of the schedule.
John Hand from the AP was the person charged or other irregularities connected to petition efforts in other states. There have been charges against circulators in Kansas and Florida, for example.
Okay. The question from John Hanna with the AP was whether or not this particular individual was, and I'm paraphrasing, maybe part of circulation efforts in other states, and have maybe this individual been charged in other states. I'll take a first crack at this, and then Marty, you can weigh in. I don't have any evidence to suggest that this person was doing any circulating of any petitions in any other states. This is a Nebraska resident who appears to have just been involved. I don't want to say that it wasn't involved in other petitions. There's a number of other ones that are this year, but appears to be the paid work appears to be localized to this particular set of petitions. Marty, do you have anything to add to that, though?
We don't have any evidence that tells us that this individual worked outside of the state of Nebraska. The evidence shows us that he worked primarily in Hall County, possibly a couple of near counties, exclusively in Nebraska. So our evidence doesn't point to him working anywhere else.
Thanks, Marty. Well, we are out of time. I want to thank everyone for joining this morning. I really appreciate all of the questions and the attention and interest in this particular issue. I want to again thank Marty Klein, all of our partners in Hall County for the outstanding work that they did, as well as the members of my team. And the last thing I want to just underline one more time for Nebraskans, that we are on the lookout for fraudulent activity in our election process. One of our most important duties is to protect the integrity of our particular elections. We will work together, and if we identify things, we'll investigate, and if appropriate, we will prosecute. And we want to make sure that those who might interfere with our elections in this kind of a way understand that law enforcement election officials are on the lookout, and we will take action. And we would highly discourage people from even thinking twice. Thank you all very much. Have a good day.
Recording stopped.